to yet another Saturday session of Talking Films Online. This group was formed on June 2nd, 2020, that is during the COVID-induced lockdown, when most of us were watching a lot more films than we normally do. Almost on a whim, Nikhila and I decided to formalize our Facebook discussions on films by forming an online film club. Since then, we have had uninterrupted discussions on films from all over the world every Saturday at 9 p.m. We have also held film festivals of Iranian, French, Kannada, and other cinemas. We hold an annual smartphone filmmaking contest for students every June as part of our anniversary celebrations. This evening, we will be discussing Hemant Chaturvedi's film, Chaayakyaan, The Management of Shadows. I'm delighted to inform you all that the maker of this documentary is present with us. Hemant Chaturvedi spent over 30 years working as a cinematographer in Mumbai before moving away from that profession in 2015. His cinematography credits include films like Company, Makdi, Makbul, 15 Park Avenue, Ishaqzade, Qurban, Brothers, and even an animation film called Arjun, the Warrior Prince. He returned to full-time still photography and only works on his own projects, which range from Drupad Gurukul's, his project for the sesquicentennial of his alma mater, St. Xavier's College, Mumbai, to the photo documentation of India's single-screen cinema heritage, documenting old British era cemeteries and abandoned Hindu idols and so on. Welcome, Hemant, and we look forward to hearing you.
Hello.
To lead the discussion of this film, we have with us Dr. Nirmala M.N. Nirmala is an assistant professor at the Department of Media Studies at Christ University, Bangalore. She completed her PhD in film studies from the English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad, and has been a recipient of CSDS ICSSR Doctoral Fellowship. She has worked as a journalist at Times of India and Asian News International News Agency. She is a recipient of the National Film Archive of India Research Fellowship. She's a trained fact checker and has been a member of the Department Ethics Subcommittee for the Department of Mental Health Education at National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, that is NIMHANS, Bangalore. Her research interests are in the areas of film studies, film labor, health communication, gender and caste studies, popular culture, and mass politics. Welcome, Nirmala, and over to you.
Thank you, Geeta. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Firstly, thank you, Hemant. Review the documentary because I'm sure most of you come for the discussion. You have already watched it, but I'm going to raise some of those very important or discuss some of those very important issues brought in the documentary from the perspective of an outsider. Because when I started working on junior artists for my doctoral work, it was more as an outsider that I was visiting the film set or looking at the film workspace. So to look at the documentary and someone who's documenting the journey of cinematographer as an insider, someone who is part of the craft, who has been the fellow traveler. So it's very interesting to know the kind of narration this documentary has brought. And the documentary was suggested. For me, it was not just about Hemant looking at not just as a tribute to the veteran cinematographer, but it was also very importantly a critic at the film labor within the largest film industry. For me, I usually look at the unskilled workforce, but to see the perspective of a skilled workforce. And usually when we would visit the film set, especially with the artist I was working with, the DOP was one of the most powerful person there. It was one of the second in command and most important person on the set. And the anecdotes the artist shared, they're hilarious. They're worth talking about, and their perspective about how they looked at the cinematographer's work, and kind of reminded me about what once VK Murthy sir told me. I did have an opportunity of meeting him in 2009, much before, a few months before he was awarded the Dada Saheb Phalke Award. And it's very rare to find someone like him. Very simple, very someone who could who was a teacher. I was writing an article on him, and I bought a camera just few months, and I'd not operated, and I was not really confident, but I was a fangirl as well, not just the reporter meeting him. So I took my camera and I started taking videos and images, and he was such a wonderful person, and you would direct me where to how to hold the camera, which the lighting would be better, whether it is indoor, outdoor, and also someone who would also play music for you. Is a musician who also, to find someone, to find someone like him, it's very rare. So talking about what he mentioned about, he shared an anecdote, and it's also mentioned in his biography by Umar Rao. He talks about how when they were shooting this particular film, Sai Bibi or Gulam, there was this particular scene, song sequence. It was a dance sequence for this very popular song, Sakiya Aaj Mujhe Neend Nahi Aayegi. And the background artists, the background dancers were not good looking for Gurudutt, and he was like, and they had to shoot, they had to complete the schedule. So requested VK Murthy, can we have the background artist? Can we show the background artist in such a way that their face are not highlighted? And exactly that's what VK Murthy did. And then he talks about how the artists were so excited, the background artists, and they were so happy about this old song which they shot for hours, not knowing that they won't be in the scene or they won't be visible properly in the scene. So this was an anecdote shared by him, and also something that I constantly also encountered or heard by the artists themselves. So as an outsider, the way we looked at the craft and the cinematographers at the workplace was a lot different. But definitely, talking about something very, very important, I hope I'm not all over the place. I hope to be focused and talk about this particular craft. Something very important was about something that very importantly the documentary also highlights is our lack of understanding about the aesthetics, aesthetic aspect of filmmaking. And most of us as film researchers, because we don't understand the very aspect of aesthetic aspect of filmmaking, we also ignore the contribution of the craftsmen, like cinematographers. It's we are more focused on the product than the process. Where if especially when I start looking at my own film, my own craft that I'm working with, and from a labor perspective, and look at the visual narrative and the theories around visual narrative, there's a different perspective altogether that I get it from the craft that I look from. So the documentary very importantly draws a message on how lack of understanding of people within the industry, the critic or the researchers' understanding of aesthetics of filmmaking, and how that has also in a way contributed in ignoring or acknowledging this particular craft. And thank you for highlighting that or spotlighting that particular message in the documentary. Interestingly, when I was looking at the unionization of crafts. And historically, cinematographers are one of those one of the early crafts to be organized as early as 1953. They formed an association much earlier than most of the crafts. And this whole the need to associate, need to come together, need to organize is also this whole idea about how they felt the lack of acknowledgement, lack of recognition so early as 1950s. So they formed the association in 1953, and they also registered, not just leaving it as a society or an association, registering it as a trade union in 1956. That also talks about how they were very vocal about their rights as during the studio era, that period that you also cover, or from the beginning. So it's a very important craft, even when we look at the way the labor in the film industry is organized, because when they started, historically, they were also trying to model it based on American Society of Cinematographer, ASC, and they tried replicating a similar model. So they were really thoughtful about what they were doing in the 1950s, as early as that. So it was not just not just collectivization. It's not about coming together, but they wanted it to be very structured, and they also brainstorm over it to be registered as a trade union. And also the Western Cinematographers Association continues to be a model for the other crafts that were formed later, including the Federation of Western Cine Employees, which is one of the umbrella bodies. So the Cinematographers Association, historically, looking from the labor perspective, looking from the labor rights or about recognition, they have an history and a very, very important that has continued to influence other crafts in organizing and also raising some of those very important concerns at workplace, very important concerns at the workplace. But again, when I was looking at this particular aspect about they coming together, the still photographers who also work very closely with cinematographers came together very late, and they formed an association. There are other politics for that, but also the lightmen also work very closely. The light assistants are part of the Mazdoor Union, another very important union. So the hierarchy within the craft, especially hierarchy within the cinematographer craft, and hierarchy within the crafts that closely work with cinematographer, whether it's the light boy or the still photographer, is again a very, very important area to be looked at, very important area. And I'm sure when you talk about this 40-hour footage and each of them talking for 2 hours, and if you ever convert them into an episode, there's going to be a lot of stories that are worth. The oral story is going to be a very, very important resource, and I'm really looking forward to understand if they also talk about this power dynamics or the hierarchy within the craft, especially especially about when we talk about and very important area that I also look forward to working on is with the light boys and the light assistant. That is something that I always been interested in, something that I look forward to do researching on. And I understand when we were interacting with some of them at my early stage of my research, and the kind of conversation and that they bring in about the old craft and about cinematography and their association with this particular craft and cinematographers, and the hierarchy that exists and the creative conflict that exists. It's again a very interesting area to understand. Need some notes so that I don't miss out on something.
So I'll tell you a couple of things before you resume.
Please.
One of the characters in my film, the late Mr. Ishwar Bidri, right? He started his career as an assistant on the sets of Sahib Bibi Aur Gulam with PK Murthy, right? And he told us, I asked him the same story about the dancers being kept in the dark and Meenu Mumtaz being lit, and the myth that has perpetuated over the years about the makeup and the costume and so on and so forth. So he very categorically said, no, that's all rubbish. Guru Dutt was very fond of, and he subscribed to the American Cinematographer magazine. And a few days before that particular song was shot, the latest issue had come on set, and he was going through it, and he found some stills, black and white stills of a Hollywood film, a musical, where that effect had been created. So apparently he's gone up to Murthy and said, "Yaar, Murthy, aisa kuch karke dikhana." So I actually have that in my rushes. So it was such a big debunking of this perpetuated myths that one has grown up with, so that there's no one to corroborate the story anymore, unfortunately. Secondly, since you're talking about labor and light boys and so on and so forth, I also interviewed 7 elderly light boys while I was filming with the cinematographers to find out what their opinion was, what their thoughts were on, since they're always working for a cinematographer, what is it about a cinematographer that appeals to them? What is it that they don't like about them? What is the hierarchy, the methodologies, etc., and how different people work, who their favorite cinematographers were. So we did cut I think it was a 21-minute sequence, which was just the light boys talking about their favorite cinematographers and everything. But somehow it didn't fit into the narrative of the film. After spending an hour, 40 minutes investing in these 14, 15 people, suddenly to digress for 20 minutes seemed just a little off. So we just removed that chunk. But they had some very interesting things to say. And I think the bottom line was that a light boy likes to be treated with respect. That's it. And they do talk about situations where कि लाइटिंग के वक्त बहुत गालियां और चिल्लाना होता है, लेकिन एक बार लाइटिंग हो जाए तो राधू जी भी आके ना गले पे हाथ रख के हमारे साथ बीड़ी पीते थे, that kind of story. So the stress is only while the actual scene is being lit. Once the lighting is done, then it was all peaceful.
Just adding to what you said, and V.K. Murthy sir also mentioned about how there were episodes on set where you would walk away and Guru Dutt ji had to come and convince him and tell him, at least come and complete this song, if not the film. And I'm sure those episodes are, that also depends when someone who doesn't, there's no ego, if the director can come back and say, apologize and say, your contribution is important, without you, the work is incomplete.
While we were shooting Govindji's interview, I think that was one of the longest. He and Jahangir, I think, spoke for the longest, well over 2 hours. And while Jahangir is the philosopher, Govindji goes well beyond philosophy and gets into the nitty-gritty of life and the Guru Shishya Parampara and all these things. And I still remember how my hair stood on end and I had tears in my eyes when he talked about how Guru Dutt had died and he'd gone to meet Mr. Murthy. And he said, Guru Dutt died, how did you feel? And he said, after a few minutes, he said, I cried, but not for him. I cried for myself. And V.K. Murthy shot a total of 59 feature films. Name one out of the 3 famous ones. And that shows how a person achieved such great, immortality with one director. And after that, couldn't produce a frame to, it's really bizarre that the quality of your work just plummets. I think when he worked with Govind Nihalani as a cinematographer, he achieved some excellence. When he worked with Govind Nihalani on Discovery of India, he achieved some excellence. But that huge chunk of 55 films outside of Guru Dutt, no one remembers a single one. And they're all just the same tacky, contemporary, zoom in, zoom out, bad lighting films. It's just so strange that a man with such control would just fall apart when he didn't have the right guidance. Very interesting.
Just adding to what you said, especially about the Guru Shishya Parampara, where the Guru Shishya Parampara we can be nostalgic about it in the industry, but also there are also the pros and cons about the Guru Shishya Parampara, and I'm sure, especially in the skilled workforce, many of those talented ones would also never get those opportunity to be one, and they continue to work as an assistant all their life. So I'm sure there are several stories like that as well, especially with Govind Nilani sir, and where he talks about Vikramurthy, where he mentions someone who has worked as your assistant, and you're ready to, when he debuts as a director, you're ready to work as his cameraman. That is rare, and only Vikramurthy, someone like Vikramurthy, can do that. When Govind Nilani sir was doing Thomas, and to work in your cinema, in your assistant's film, like someone who has worked with your assistant, to be the cinematographer and to be that anchor to his film, that is very not many such examples in the industry.
A very nice story from Govindji about, again, this is from the rushes, it's not in the film. He said, when I started shooting Tamas, I realized it was something very large and very complicated. Maybe I should not also be the director of photography. Then he went to Mr. Murthy and said, sir, this is what I'm doing. Would you please take care of the cinematography? And Mr. Murthy graciously agreed. Govindji says that on the first day of the shoot, Murthy Saab is sitting on the dolly with the camera and the whatever. And Govindji is sitting on a stool next to the camera, and he's watching this scene being filmed. And he says, by the end of that first shot, I had no idea what was going on, because I was not used to looking at this expanse, of people in a frame outside of through a viewfinder. So he lasted about half the day, and then finally went to Murthy Saab and said, look, please do the lighting and shot divisions, but do you mind if I operate the camera when we're shooting a scene, because I have no idea what's going on. And Govindji said that, he said, if I know I'm going to do 2 or 3 takes of a scene, then I had this way of adjusting the zoom on another character and then compensating in the other take with another character, which Murthy Saab would not be able to do, because it was Govindji's instinct to do it, because that is what he'd done forever. So he actually then finally operated the camera on Tamas, and Murthy Saab just did the lighting and shot divisions and collaborated in that way.
That's interesting. It's really interesting. When I was just watching the documentaries, and very consciously, I'm sure it's just been about their conversation and the conversation with you, because the kind of confidence they have, and this a fellow cinematographer, the insider stories that they are sharing. It's also and also it's very conversational. They also take your name, and it's what it just reminded me of this quote from this documentary that I had watched, Writing with Light by Victoria Storaro. I just want to quote, and that is what I felt when I watched the documentary, and and the way each of them expressed about their work life experience. And I'll just read the quote, because that is what I could relate to it. Victorio mentions, like quoting him, I think each movie is a part of your life, even if you don't want it to be, because while you are living your working, and through your work, you are expressing yourself. And step by step, as you express yourself, you grow as a human being. And likewise, the more you grow as a human being, the more you express yourself. And I'm sure all the veteran cinematographers had also been in the stage of life where they were ready to express and talk, because I'm sure they had grown as human being with.
In fact, I think Jahangir Chaudhary talks about it in as many words. He said, one day as a cinematographer, you find your voice. And he says, it's not that you can say so much more through the lighting and the story. And he said, that changed me as a person. The fact that he was putting his mark on whatever he was doing. From his experience and his knowledge and his finding his voice. That's the whole point. The day you know what you're doing and you can experiment with it and do it confidently and push it. That's the day everyone has waited for. That's the most day of revelation for a cinematographer, or any artist for that matter. When you become one with your medium, I think that's the critical thing.
And also about like when we were working on unionization and looking at various craft and looking at the gender roles in those crafts, and especially in Mumbai, where it was more loud, and also because some of them had also taken the legal route to talk about the gender bias and in the industry. One of it was also cinematographers. Association, very few female representation, though they were not denied the membership, the very few representation in your documentary also. But for Vaidaji, who's not cinematographer, but someone who's but because of her close association with the cinematographer, it's very important. But also it also talks about there are 14 veteran cinematographers from various period of, like, in the last over the decades, and not a single women cinematographer. So I was
Weren't any. Nirmala, there weren't any.
they weren't.
The first woman cinematographer was Vijay Lakshmi, who started sometime in the late 80s, and she worked till the mid 90s. I think towards the late 80s, a couple of women documentary cinematographers started working. I think Priya Seth was the first woman to shoot a feature film in India, and that was in 2009. And from what I've understood from that era and my conversations with the veterans, and because I'm part of that business, at least I was, there was no gender bias at that point. There were no women interested in being cinematographers. Cinematography had become something that was looked upon as being very physical and exacting, and therefore became male dominated, not because they didn't, they had a gender bias. The women always found costume design, editing, choreography. Those were the more artistic and intensive crafts that they participated in. And also the one thing I must say, I should have actually mentioned it in the film somewhere. The 14 people that I've chosen in the film, the reason why there's such an eclectic bunch of people from that era, or from an era that spans a certain number of years, these are the 14 of the 17 people that I had approached in 1989, 1991 to work with as an assistant. I'd spent 4 years working in television, and I wanted to work with someone and learn and become a better cinematographer, and none of them took me on. The 3 who are missing are the ones who passed away, which are Mr. Murthy, Mr. Mahajan, and Ashok Mehta. And I've been on all their sets, and which is why the comfort in the film is such, because they've known me for so many years. And finally, when I started doing features, each of them has called me at some point of my career to appreciate something that I've done. And it was a relationship that built over the years, which is why it's like a Malaysian documentary filmmaker friend of mine saw the film, and he had a very interesting term to use for the comfort that I had, or they had, we had with each other. He said that the interviews are horizontal, because they know they're talking to someone to whom there is no need for them to explain themselves. Not only does this person understand what we're talking about, he has his own opinion about it as well. So I like the concept of the horizontal interview, where both people are equal and facing each other. And yeah, that's so these were, and there were no women cinematographers at that point of time. In fact, the first screening happened at FTII in March. And it was a surprisingly subdued audience. I was expecting the film school kids to get up and, kuch to udham karenge, I'd actually expected some. One of them finally stood up and said, "Sir, I am very disappointed by the gender bias in your film." So whatever his name was, I said, to notice gender bias in a film about this era of cinematographers actually shows your own lack of knowledge about film industry. And if you want to make a film about women cinematographers, it is up to your generation to make it, not mine. So he realized that. He said, "Yeah, that's true. There weren't any." And I said, you guys have to make it, because now there are 150 very prominent women cinematographers in the business, and they're doing fabulous work. They're doing fabulous, fabulous work in a male-dominated, scenario. And they found their way to, get work done, and with grace. It's not necessary that you have to be aggressive or rude, or, it's about winning confidence. And even for a male cinematographer, you may find it easier to, bark at your crew. But finally, it's that relationship that builds, because you know what you're doing, and they're happy to do it. I think that's the balance that everyone has to strike with these people.
I just in what you mentioned about FTIA, and when we were looking at like sometime back and trying to look at the number of students who enrolled over the years after they started the cinematography course, and number of female students who have enrolled, and what is the kind of and that clearly gives a picture as well about the gender, and so that's.
So
I have a question.
R.M. Rao, who is in our film, Mr. R.M. Rao, he is from the first batch of FTI, of FII, the Film Institute of India, before T came in. He's actually from the 1962 batch. He is from the first batch.
I'm sure you can talk about the number of women in any in other technical courses over there at that point. I have a question here. I was out of there were 14 veteran cinematographers, and why there's no you're not the narrator, and there is no voice of yours. I know you were talking. You're a co-traveler, and you're also talking about some of your experiences through them, and I'm sure that is what has gone into the 138 minutes of editing and bringing in this particular conversation. But you didn't feel the need to have your voice and about your experience as one of them, or no? It's just I'm just curious. I know it says, but still.
Well, there was never any intention of me being part of the film, barring the few occasions that my voice has come in or they mentioned me by name, etc. It was always meant to be about them, and through them, it is about me as well. You know, I mean, to put it in a very informal way, I think having worked in that profession for so many years, basically, I've taken all my pet peeves with the industry and made a film about it. You know, that's what it is. Finally, you know, everything that has pissed off a cinematographer in all these years, and the fact that there is so much effort and knowledge and application that goes into what we do. But if the person in front of you doesn't realize what you bring to the table, then it's a waste of time. In fact, Praveen Bhatt says that cinematography doesn't make or break a film. You can add to it, but you can't make the film run. Finally, it's up to the satisfaction of the director and the camera to produce good cinematography. So that's, yeah, I never wanted to be part of it. It is me finally who's, you know, it is my voice at the end of the day.
I think before, can we open up, ma'am? Nicola, ma'am, can we open it up?
Yes.
Others, so that we'll join in later.
Yeah, surely. Thank you so much, Nirmala. And thank you, Hemant, also for adding to what Nirmala had to say. It is now open for discussion. It is a very important film, and you know, the discussion of the times and the craft was really fascinating, with each cinematographer speaking with such clarity, humor, passion, and nostalgia. But I have asked you this question, Hemant, before, and let me just repeat it. I was wondering if you could have shown one clip at least from their films. Was there a reason why you chose not to? For instance, you know, Baba Azmi talks about that romantic scene which was shot with only candles that had to be worked on to render it visible. So did you have a particular reason for not including film clips?
It was never planned, largely because I didn't want to break the intimacy that you build with a person talking. And none of them actually, you know, barring one or two of them who refer to a specific film or a specific scene, not many of them actually talk about actual work. You know, it's more about the philosophy of the work. Mm-hmm. So I'd never wanted to use film clips, which is, I think sometimes one has to. It's also a very default way of being underconfident about what you have in terms of material, to keep cutting away to, you know, things that are entertaining or, you know, in some way distracting. And I never wanted to do that because I was very clear that what I have is priceless, and I don't want to be looking into a person's eyes, you know, and then cut to some, you know, grainy old footage which is impossible to track down in the first place. And these world right owners, the guys who control the films, it's like breaking your head against a wall. I mean, I haven't had to do it, fortunately, but I've had people who've told me how. In fact, they asked me the same question as you did, and they said, "No, I'm glad you didn't do it because you would have aged, several years trying to get film clips from people, and they charge you a fortune, and you're not controlling the quality of it. You're not controlling the aspect ratio of it because people have scanned in wrong aspect ratios, So it's just one big mess. But to answer your question at the simplest level, it was always meant to be about the conversations and nothing else.
Oh, thank
because
you.
I was confident about what I had.
Thank you. Any other questions anyone would like to?
Sorry,
yeah.
Add one more. There's been a very large number of people who have asked me the same question as you. They've actually mentioned it, not asked me a question, but they've mentioned it. And to a man, to a woman, to a child, they've all said that, look, after 20, 30 minutes of watching these people, we were wondering when you're going to start cutting to clips and stuff. And after about 40 minutes, we were so glad you didn't, because it's just so engrossing.
That's true. Yes.
Lives are unfolding that we're actually really glad you didn't. So it's been a very interesting journey when it comes to clips. They're not being used in the film.
Yeah, Nikhila, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Hemant, for the wonderful film. I mean, it was so riveting. I think your subjects are so wonderful, and what they have to say is so important that you kind of want to hang on to every word. So after, as you were saying, after you get used to the idea that this is going to be about conversations, I think you just soak in every word that they are saying. And some of it was so profound. I mean, to think that, they had such insights, not just about cinema as a craft, but about life. And the way they reflected upon, their journey. It was also moving in, several places without it just becoming pathos or any such thing. So it was very, very interesting to watch. I had two sets of questions regarding the film. One is, I was trying to read it, as you said, at one level, I was, since I had also read by then, on Wikipedia of all places that you had quit the profession. At one level, it seemed very much like you talking to these people, as a kind of a dialogue engagement. So what does it mean to be a cinematographer? So at some level, it was also your question that was getting answered through these various conversations. So I was wondering if, or at least it was coming through like that for me. But I was also thinking about it as, is it possible for us to think of these interviews as some kind of approach to writing film history, or some way of narrating film history? So it's trying to look at various points where they talk about change and how it was before, or if they have some sense of, okay, this was how it was then, and this is what happened, later. There are very few moments of that. So I was wondering if, it is in the nature of the questions that you asked, or what was it? So is it that you wanted to, document the craft, or document individual insights into cinematography, into the craft itself? So I was not sure it can become a kind of film history. So I was just wondering if you have any thoughts on that. So if one is to narrate film history, it has already been narrated for too long, through various kinds of signposts, other kinds of signposts. But if one were to write a cinematographer's version of film history, what would it look like? So this is one question. The second question, maybe because you stopped short of that era, I was wondering, the question of the digital does not come up at all. So nobody seems to, or did I miss it? I was wondering about that. Or how do they feel about contemporary cinema? Because it's like a different world altogether. Everyone today is a cinematographer. So it's like virtually a different scenario. So nobody seems to talk about that at all. So was it a conscious decision to stop short, stop with the celluloid and not go to the digital? So these were my two questions. Thank you very much.
I'll start from the very beginning, where you talk about me getting my questions answered through these people. I think had a somewhat tenuous relationship with my profession from about 2012 onwards. I think something had happened where I realized that I wanted to do something more important with my life. And I think to be able to come to a point where you take a decision to quit what you've done for so long, to walk away from something that has become your, your second nature, or the blood in your veins, or whatever romantic, hyperbole you want to attach to it. So, I mean, I had stopped enjoying the content that I used to shoot. Okay. And as your skill level rises, and if the content deteriorates, somehow that balance then never forms. And even today, there are some films of mine that I look back at and I cringe at some of the dialogues and some of the songs, because it's just not up to the kind of education I've had. And I'm not being arrogant or pompous about it. When you have a certain purity of approach and a certain desire to do work, more work like Maqbool and Company and Makri and 15 Park Avenue and Dekh Tamasha Dekh and that kind of thing. So doing bigger films was a greater challenge, of course, and to bring your own aesthetic into a Bollywood superstar blockbuster is another level of challenge. But I'd reached a point where I had to leave. I had to leave, and I battled some serious depression for a while. Trying to come to terms with the fact that I had thought I'd run my course. So when I did quit, the first thing I did was start my research. And I felt that the only people who could answer all these questions that I had built up over the years were people before me. And through them, I could compare my journey to see if anything was any different. And I came to the conclusion that it's just luck finally, that's all it is. It is a lot to do with your, the quality of your work, which will remain permanent for generations to come. Your longevity is based on luck. I think that is what I realized. I realized through the interviews that those of my caste who had chosen to walk away from the profession were the happier people. The ones that were still waiting for that, one last project and, to go in a blaze of glory, they weren't enjoying their lives at all. Okay. Second question was about, so if the film is 138 minutes long and I have 15 people in the film, discounting the credits and the animation and all that sort of stuff, everyone has got approximately 6 minutes in the film, right? If you do the mathematics, they have spoken to me for an hour and a half to 2.5 hours each. One of the conscious decisions in my editing pattern of the film was to leave out anything that would be technical and therefore alienate a broader audience. So if one cameraman talks about how in 1969 he was shooting with 62 ASA film and he had to pre-flash it and post-fog it and post-process it and push-process it, it's of no consequence today, because even a cinematographer who's 35 years old today has no clue what they're talking about. So I left out everything that was technical, everything to do with lensing, film stocks, processing, anything that had jargon that would not be understood by this generation, I consciously left out and made it a film about people's journeys, at an emotional level. I think that was something that we did. And that is the reason that such a wide audience has managed to relate to the film. I mean, I've had Indians, non-Indians, cinematographers, non-cinematographers, industry people, non-industry people, Indians, foreigners, older people, younger people, men, women, children. I mean, everyone. I think the youngest two boys who saw it was 16 and 17 years old. And both of them are budding photographers and filmmakers. And they said, you've given us a path in life. I said, well, great. And what was the last one? The digital thing. So the digital thing is discussed. It's discussed at length. And In the edit, it didn't find a place. Also, I think because almost all of them are very dismissive of the lackadaisical approach that cinematographers have today towards their work, because they have a monitor and it's digital and you can, it's not film being shot, it's a hard drive being filled that can be erased. So and the pressures of time where you can aesthetically surmount them. But since the number of cinematographers is that much more, and the work that is available, people tend to compromise a lot more while they're shooting and compensate in post. Okay. Something as simple as an exposure meter, which is the most fundamental tool in a cinematographer's life. None of them use meters anymore because they've got a monitor and they think, so I've told a lot of them, I said, you can adjust the exposure on a monitor, but you can never create the lighting ratios for a scene because you're not measuring anything. You're just exposing it correctly. And post is like now, I mean, the kind of machines that you have for post is like Photoshop. It's the power of, you can create 100 layers and you can recreate everything in that scene. So that pressure. So one of the interesting questions that I asked about digital to all the cinematographers was, because of the advent of high ISO sensors, which means that when we were shooting with 50 ASA, 100 ASA, 150, 200, whatever, now you have a base ISO of 800, which means you need a lot less light to get an image. So one of the questions I asked is, what are the lighting skills that are now being lost because you have such sensitive cameras? And one of my examples is a very simple one, was where if you had to light a scene which was to be a candlelit scene, for example, we would use maybe 50, 60 kilowatts of light to be able to recreate that flicker and the exposure and the colors and the texture of a flame. Now you just light the candle, that's all you need to do. You don't need to use any lights at all. So skills being lost. There was Nadeem Khan, poor man, he's been in a coma for 2.5 years now. But he said something very interesting as well. And I will not, I won't quote him, quote his language when I'm telling you the story, because he tends to get a little enthusiastic. But he said, Hemant, there is something I want to say and promise me that you will keep it in the film. And we couldn't because we didn't. He says, we worked very hard to achieve the title of a director of photography. Today, all you need to do is buy a digital camera. For every camera in the market, there is a cinematographer. And he says now anyone or everyone without any knowledge or finesse or technique calls himself a director of photography. So that, we discussed it at length. But what happened was that, again, I think there was a lot of negativity in that series, in that section. And I didn't want to bring any negativity of that kind where a generation is being dismissive of another generation. I just felt it was not, it's a thought. I mean, there's nothing invalid about it, right? But it didn't fit into the mood of my film. And I didn't want to be disparaging towards, mine or a later generation. Every generation does what they are given, works with what they have. The generation that we have in the film was also looked down upon the previous generation for having it easy. For cinematographers who worked with 25 ASA film, and for cinematographers who suddenly had 100 and 200 and 500 ASA film, again, it's just a trickle down of that attitude, which I didn't want to keep in the film at all. But it is discussed at length.
Any other question? Yes, Nirmala, please go ahead.
I just wanted to add to what Mr. M.N. mentioned. One is I really like the fact that you didn't have the technical aspects, because we have very few documentaries. One is a tribute by Govind sir for V.K. Murthy. But other than that, there are not many documentaries on cinematographers, but for very few interviews at certain point, but not a documentary on them, but for that one tribute. When we look at other the documentaries done on cinematographers in Hollywood or in they're mostly chronicling with respect to the cinema, from the perspective of the cinema that they were associated with, or about the technical aspect or the style that they brought into the craft. It's mostly from the craft, but very few documentaries talk about the work-life experience. And I think the highlight of this documentary is they are talking about the work-life stories, and they're very few, and that is very important. And thank you for keeping the technical aspect out of it, which is
So, and,
what I expected when I.
right. And on the subject of chronicling cinema, my film does it very subtly. You know, it shows you the different eras of the socio-cultural, political, cinema atmospheres that have existed over the 50 years that these people worked. From the studio system to, you know, actors becoming freelancers, signing more films. So there's been a rapid deterioration of quality, okay, that happened. If you look at the films in the late 60s, 70s, 80s, early 90s, I mean, they are unwatchable. I mean, they may have the stories that grip you or gripped us then, but technically they're disastrous. I mean, you look at a film like Zanjeer, you know, Amitabh Bachchan's Zanjeer, you will be riveted for those 2.5 hours. But if you look at it from a technical point of view, it's abhorrent. It's horrible. So when the studio system, and you understand the way the studio system used to work, right? That everyone was an employee, from the cinematographer to the actor to the staff to the camera attendants to light boys. Everyone was on monthly salaries, right? When the studio system fell apart, the actors became freelancers, so they could sign many more films, right? They were not bound by a studio to do one film a year or not start another film until the previous one was over. So suddenly they had, you know, 3, 4, 5, and I think Govinda finally achieved a record of signing some 56 films in one day. Okay, that kind of nonsense. So when more actors came into the, you know, when more films started getting signed, more films went into production, you needed that many more cameramen. So that was the point where the half-baked assistants started coming into the field, right? People who had not spent the right amount of time to learn the craft, because in those days, it was a craft. You know, you had to understand that the complexity of the machine and the lighting and the ratios and the sensitivity of the film and, you know, the whole process of. But that's when the deterioration started. In fact, one of the questions that I asked, and this is one of my favorite ones, which we couldn't keep in the film, but I asked all of them about the transition of black and white to color. Okay, and who was the person who actually finally understood color photography, color cinematography, and treated it in that way? Why? Because if you look at a lot of the first maybe 8 or 9 years of color films in India, they'll be very loud and garish and, you know, seemingly badly lit. And if you take the color out of them, if you're sitting on a television and you have controls over the color and you bring it to zero and make them black and white films, they're beautiful black and white films. You know, the lighting style had not adapted to the fact that what you're looking at is real. So the lighting therefore has to correspond to that reality. Black and white had certain principles where you needed to create shades of gray to, you know, separate people from backgrounds, to, you know, highlight certain, body structure, face structure. People used to wear, in black and white films, there was a whole range of pastel colors that people used to wear to be able to create the shades of gray that you actually saw in a film. And I'd studied that for years ago. I was doing some television thing which required to be in black and white eventually. But I did the research on all the pastel colors that were required to produce those shades of gray. So 10 years, you realize that the realism of color didn't come in until people like Shubroto Mitra, Ishan Arya suddenly realized that color is what you see in real life, and therefore you have to light recreating that kind of feel. So that was something that we've done. We've shot very thoroughly, actually, that whole transition period. And they've chronicled it really well. They're all of them are from that era as well, you see. So their own realizations of when they realized how to light color and how to, you know, make it look contemporary.
And also, I think I would like to mention, especially in these times, the fact we have cinematographers from different region, language background, and religion background. It's more of a very inclusive, this whole north and south divide that we talk about cinema. And if you look, V.K. Murthy working with Gurudutt, or you look at or some of this film, it's very interesting when we look at the very inclusive culture about the technicians and the background that they came from. And I think that's something that we don't talk about when we talk about the inclusive culture of cinema making from the workplace perspective, especially.
Also, do you realize that every single character in my film is an accidental cinematographer? none of them set out in life to do what they ended up doing for all, for the rest of their careers. It was all serendipitous moments in their lives, and the concatenation of circumstances that made them take that, the road less walked, or the road not taken, and suddenly spend 50 years in a profession. It's fascinating. I'm an accidental cinematographer as well. So
there are a couple of messages in the chat box. There's one from Sridhar. The documentary has been skillfully edited by Suchitra Sathe from nearly 39 hours of footage.
Madam, Geeta madam, I gave it for you as an information for your question.
Oh, sorry. Okay. And I think Nikhila has said this. There is a documentary on V.K. Murthy by Manohar Singh Bisht called Light, Shadow and Me. It's a films division documentary.
Geeta, can I ask a question?
Yes, please, Ajanta. Please go ahead.
I hope Sir doesn't mind that my questions are going to be quite incoherent, and it's also my big fangirl moment. Yeah. So Maqbool is a film, one of my all-time favorites of all time, sir. But I'm not at all an insider, so as I said, I hope you don't mind. But one, I'm really interested in your journey. First of all, I actually studied children's films. So I'm very, very interested. Of course, Vishal Bhardwaj is therefore one of the great icons, that he began his journey with Makri, and of course, your foray into the digital world. So picking up from where Nikhila talked about, and how do we write film histories? So I think one really neglected aspect of film histories is of course, the advertising film. The other, these public broadcast service films, a lot of the cinematographers actually come from that background. Also, given the kind of standard sort of, ideological distinctions that we have with Lumiere and Méliès, what I find so interesting when I study children's films is that distinction does not really hold. So this idea that we capture reality, sir, is something that I, of course, find philosophically kind of problematic, because no camera ever can. And I am very, very inspired by a certain tradition of film scholarship, which actually says that, given the widespread availability of cinephilia today, and the fact that anybody that can have a digital camera, many of the kind of questions of the 20s avant-garde, Ziga Vertov, are actually in some ways reappearing once again. And I think there's also a very, very kind of important break that the digital is making, and who better to discuss that with you than you. So the art of perspective and so on. First of all, of course, don't give us truth. That idea of realism is itself hugely ideologically loaded. But now, as all information is converted into the binary system, 0 and 1, even the sort of that whole tradition where we were, in a sense, cinema emerges out of a tradition of photography. Now that philosophical connection is broken. So there are huge philosophical implications also. So the history of cinema is not just celluloid film. And if we look at cinema in that way, or do you look at cinema in that way? Because your knowledge is so vast, you've worked with some of the great icons. I'm just wondering if, because I study children's films, what we see as legitimate entertainment, the classic realist narrative, and all of that is displaced. When you look at other genres of filmmaking, the documentary was, of course, one such. But I mean, as I said, and I'm sorry if I'm sounding incoherent, but one, I don't agree with you that the digital is something not as good. And please forgive me because I have no caliber to say this, but I'm just sort of saying this philosophically, because I don't think cinema no camera ever can. While, we assume that with the camera, the eye of man is replacing the eye of God. We know now that that's an ideological assumption as well, isn't it? And just, thank you for making these great films of all time.
No, I must correct you here. I'm not saying that the digital era is producing any lesser work than it did previously. Okay, I very clearly believe that a lot of fantastic work is happening these days. But there's a certain dependence on the camera, okay, there is no more dependence on the fundamental tools of the craft, and more dependent on instant gratification of a monitor, and the reliance on post that is allowing you to do a lot more. Okay, so it's like a lot of, I used to have this funny, theory that the people who used to work towards making a great film now work at the other end of the the cinematic process. Okay. I mean, for example, something like Ben-Hur. Okay, we'll take Ben-Hur as an example. When that chariot race takes place, you see crowds, you see these huge sets, and you see so much, action and people rising and falling and waving and screaming. The interesting thing is that a lot of the audience members were actually mechanical devices that were created to rise and sit. They were based on clockwork mechanisms. A lot of the gigantic sets were actually made on glass mats. So they would be positioned strategically in a frame in front of the camera with the illustration going beyond the existing set. Okay. So the amount of work that used to happen as a preamble towards making a film now happens in the post studio. Right. And that is a consequence of budgets, time, artists, craftsmen, etc., etc., etc. So I'm not at all saying that the work in the digital era has deteriorated. Not at all. Not at all. I mean, what was it? When I was starting out as a still photographer, this senior of mine had told me once that buying a Nikon doesn't make you a photographer. It makes you the owner of a Nikon camera. Okay. And while more and more people are being given the opportunity to work today, there's only a small percentage that actually produce memorable work. Okay. That percentage is kind of changing now. There's a lot of replication. There's a lot of copying. There's a lot of haste and lack of commitment today because of the pressures of the workplace that the 21st century is seeing. Post-pandemic, when the film industry reopened and people started shooting, I've had so many of my assistants call up and say, "Sir, I'm glad you left when you did. You wouldn't last a day in the manner that we shoot today." That people are shooting 22, 24, 28 hours a day without a break, and things have just gone crazy. So you have to put out a lot more work in a lot less time and still make it look acceptable. But the process has changed, so it's still possible. In that era, it wasn't possible. Going back to your statement about advertising. In that era of the cinematographers in my film, Mr. R.M. Rao was one of the pioneers of advertising cinematography. He shot more than 4,500 commercials. And there was a period of about 9 years, he mentions, where between 1967 and maybe 1975, where if you walked into a cinema theater and you saw a commercial, he had shot it. He was the only advertising cinematographer in Bombay. That was because there was only that many films being made. And then Mahajan Saab came in, then Govindji came in, and then other people came in. And a lot of these people like Barun Mukherjee, who's in the film, tried very hard to be in the movies because that's what he wanted to do, but ended up getting a lot more work and becoming much more famous as an advertising cinematographer. And he's done more than 3,500 commercials. And till today, he regrets that he didn't do any better films. So it's all a very big, mix up.
Thank you, sir. I'm just so delighted to have you, have a chance to interact with.
I hope I answered your queries and.
Yes, of course, of course.
Yeah, thank you, Ajanta. Anyone else would like to step in with a comment or a question? There's a comment in the chat box from Lakshmi. Govind Nihalani said earlier, the cinematographer or individual would challenge and dictate to and demand from technology, but now technology challenges the cinematographer individual.
Yes. And he ends that quote by saying that now it depends on my own imagination, and what you can do is limitless. He said it's daunting.
Professor Lalita Gopalan, would you like to say something?
Oh, wow. Okay. Hi, Hemant. Hi. Hi. I love your work and I've written about your work.
Yes.
So, and it's kind of like a real honored to watch this work in a different way, right? You being the chronicler. So this junction, I have two kinds of questions. One is, I loved your discussion with Dr. Nirmala, so that was amazing. So her question she was glad that there were no technical stuff. I'm actually kind of curious if you have outtakes of this that are available as an archive. So I'm curious about that, right? As a scholar, because I know there'd be other ways of telling the story. That's one. The second is, I do have a question. The second one just comments as I was sort of, how your head gets thrown off, was that Shabnam's film on Sukhdev is kind of outstanding. You've probably seen it, right? Yeah. Okay, Shabnam's film on Sukhdev's work on the whole process, etc., is kind of like one of the great. I mean, it's on her father, so it's an amazing piece of work. The third is, I was actually kind of curious to think about the world, the Asian world of cinematography in this film, right? Because I think we tend to sort of see it in measuring ourselves against Hollywood and at times Central European filmmakers, right? Cinematographers especially. So I was wondering if there was a concern in your discussions, right? Including whether there was a discussion about what was going on in Japan, for instance, because obviously some of the film stock came from there, except I have to, right? I mean, sort of thinking between Kodak and Fuji kinds of complications that were there at that point, right? And come on, I have to give a pitch for your work. I mean, like, there is a way in which it's not a pitch for my writing, it's really a pitch for your work. Like, I think what is amazing, and I have to say this, is your way of jerry-rigging, jugaading the camera in so many different ways. Okay, and that kind of, and I think those are the sort of, what I would say, everyday practices, like using vintage lenses against the body of the camera, which you do in my group. I'm also sort of, I mean, those are the kinds of things that have to be also chronicled, right? I mean, which are there in the outtakes, I'm sure, or what you left out. So yeah, so sorry about this. Sort of, I'm in the sort of space of sort of enjoying the discussion that I didn't expect to be put on spot right now. So thank you. And anyway, it's like a real pleasure. Thank you.
So, Lalita, since
I'm sorry. Did I not do the video? Oh God, I'm sorry.
Right.
I'm feeling like a little bit of a dumb
That's all right.
Zoom. I've been off on Zoom for 2 months. So I've forgotten the protocol. Sorry about that.
I'm not very familiar with it, so.
I'm very familiar with it. It's called detoxing from teaching.
In case it all goes berserk. No, so since, like I said earlier, that if everyone has spoken for two hours approximately on an average, and I've used only 6.5 minutes of each person in the film, the idea has always been to do a series of standalone edits of each person and put them up on YouTube maybe sometime next year, so that everything else that has been said is available to people, for people to listen to. And
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Great.
So that's happening. I think my Cinematography Association, ISC, Indian Society of Cinematographers, they've chosen to sponsor that on my behalf.
Great.
Since I don't have the time to do these lengthy edits. So we'll probably cut them down to about an hour, 15 minutes each.
Okay. Wow.
Just to keep it crisp and
Absolutely.
And pack in as much information as possible.
Oh,
On a more humorous note, Suchitra, my editor, and I have always wanted to make what we call the underground version of the film.
Exactly.
Where the sexism, abuse, the criticism of directors, कि उसको बुलाओ मेरे सामने बैठाओ पूछो किसने डायरेक्ट करी थी उसने करी थी या मैंने करी थी और मुझे पैसे मिले क्या.
Exactly.
That kind of stuff where people are getting really angry about some experiences, who hasn't paid whom, how much money is owed,
Yes.
what someone told an actress, what some actress told a cinematographer,
Absolutely.
how Radhu Karmakar joined RK Studios. The funniest story on the planet, and the kind of whimsy by which a person's career starts, it's just absurd. And there's lots of these stories, and Peter Pereira himself, he's so funny, and he starts answering something in a very serious way, and then will suddenly, add a one-liner that puts perspective to, the cultural situations of the era. So yeah, we've always wanted to do that, but the standalone interviews will be up soon. I think within a year, I think they should be.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. And what about sort of like thinking about different stock? Sorry, I have to ask this question about stock because you opened it with the discussion of color. I was actually curious because if you don't mind me saying, V.K. Murthy's work in color is not so great. This is a problem. So it's not as if when you were saying this, it's not as if it's not Guru Dutt alone, right? Because it becomes a very different. I mean, he's still getting used to it, and then it's Anyway, so sorry, I had to say that. Yeah.
But Lalita, it goes one step further than that. Okay.
Okay.
It's not just that the work in color is not good. The language is missing.
Yeah.
The lens, the camera movements, the gravity is all gone.
Yeah.
And then you realize that there are certain people who perform best with certain people. The challenge has always been, and I think Jahangir Chaudhary mentions this, and I think off camera he said it in a much nicer way. In the film he says it in a more, in a kind of a different way. He says, as a cinematographer, he said, either you have to rise to your director's standards, or the director has to rise to your standards.
Yep.
But you never fall below your own standards if you haven't.
Yeah.
And that, and it's an argument that I've had with a lot of younger people who, when you watch something and say, but why did you do it like this? And why is it looking like this? Sir, time nahi tha, sir.
Yeah.
I said, lensing doesn't take time, Camera movement doesn't take time. It's about aesthetics. It's not about, I said, sometimes the worst sets produce the greatest work because you're trying to hide so much that you come up with a completely new language. But it's up to you to be able to do that. And a lot of my people whom I've taught over the years, I've constantly told this to them, and I practice it still, which is that every job that you do is not going to challenge you, right? You can either go there and have a mundane day and go home, having done a half-baked day of work, or it's up to you to challenge the day. It's up to you to challenge the work. It's up to you to bring something different. And if you do that and you do it well and you do it successfully, it's a learning experience. And when you're doing it as a way to entertain yourself or to lift what you're shooting, that particular experience will get applied in a better situation some years from now. It's a piece of knowledge that you gain. It's some new lensing that you tried, or it's some new lighting that you tried, or a camera movement, or a cinematic moment that you tried, because you chose to do it. Every day of work is not a challenge. You are the challenge. It's challenges you create which make for better work. I mean, there's a story that I've heard multiple times about Guru Dutt and Mr. Murthy, and this I heard from Mr. Murthy himself. Years ago, I'd met him a couple of times on some sets of Mr. Nihalani's. And he said Guru Dutt used to use a viewfinder, or the director's viewfinder, to set up his shots. He said that if he couldn't figure out the opening shot of a scene, he would not shoot the scene. So he said the number of times he just packed up on the day because he's not happy with the shot that he needs to start the scene with.
Yeah, I've heard that story too. Yeah,
but they had the time and the whimsy to be able to do these things. And that's where it shows finally. Ravida ji says it in the film that 50 saal ke baad bhi wo us shot ki baat kar rahe hain.
Yeah.
Because they had the time and the skill to do it, or the wherewithal and the commitment to do it. And that understanding between people. Yeah, it's a lot that goes in, and finally it's up to us to make our work look better, irrespective of who's doing what. I firmly believe that.
Yeah. God, I hope you come back to shoot films, Hemant. I hope it happens. You never know. A few.
I really enjoy what I do now, and I've done so much work, and I've been so productive in the last 7 years that sometimes, I'll sit in front of my Adobe Lightroom app and say, good God, what am I going to do? I wish I was a lazy loser and just, spent my time lazing around in the sun, but just pulled off. You know about my cinemas project, right?
Yeah, I do.
Yes, I've shot.
Yeah, but you should say it now. To share it. Yes, please.
Yes, so I've driven 36,000 kilometers in 2 years.
Yeah.
On my own in my Jeep from Kashmir to Kerala. I have visited more than 800 towns across 15 states, and I've shot nearly 1,000 cinemas. And it's not just, most people I think end up shooting a facade and I've gone into detailing, and in fact I created themes within themes within themes, and I still shoot with a 35mm discipline, so I'm not a digital skipper. So every cinema does, depending on the age and complexity of the cinema, I don't shoot more than 50 to 120 photographs per theater. 2 or 3 rolls max. One of the most interesting things that I've managed to do during this journey of shooting cinemas is wherever I find old projectors, the big old 35 projectors.
Mhm.
If one of the old projectionists is still there, so I've done this series of portraits of them in their projection room.
Lovely.
So I've got nearly 140 portraits.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, so I just have this list of things that I need to do in every cinema, and I keep
Mm.
checking my list. And every cinema doesn't afford you the same checklist, of course. I
Of
mean,
course.
that's why you have more numbers than what is available. Where
Yeah,
you
yeah,
find,
yeah.
and there are some where you find everything. There are some places that you find everything.
No,
And
this is. Mhm.
and it's been fascinating. And like I was saying earlier, I think before the session started, is that my father one day was, criticizing my enthusiasm and saying, "How many cinemas are you going to shoot?" I said, "Dad, I have no clue what I'm going to find. So unless I go there and see it myself." And we were talking before, like I said, the session started, and I'd gone to a cinema that had burnt down, Shalimar Talkies in Jangpura, Delhi. It was built in the 1930s or 40s or something, renovated once or twice, and then it burnt down, and then it went into some case and it's turned into a garbage dump.
Mhm.
So I shot the whole thing. It was very pretty cinema. There's still some old
Mhm.
embellishments of the relief work and so on.
Mhm.
Found my way up to the projection room, up one half-broken staircase, and the projectors, of course, had all gone. But the room that they used to use for rewinding and storing film
Yeah.
was strewn with old 35 reels, just lying there. So I went down on my knees and I pulled out my my smaller camera. And on one of the color positives, I found Nirupa Roy from Amar Akbar Antony.
You were looking for it.
It was there. The funny thing about a pile of positives lying on the floor is that you will only see what is backlit. So that was that one frame that had light, hitting it from behind.
Right.
And there she was glowing.
Wow. Wow. What a find, right? What a find.
Like
The
that.
mother lord.
Yes.
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 I mean, and she does play the mother. So there's that. Wow.
Oh, and my target is to come away with a minimum of 3 usable photographs from every theater that I shoot.
Oh.
And when I don't get permissions, I have broken and entered. I can say this shamelessly.
Good for you.
I think I have a few lens caps lying in different theaters across the country where I got chased by a chowkidar, or attacked by a goat or a rottweiler, or something or the other. And it happened now. The funniest one happened now in April.
Oh.
I found my way. I wanted to do Sholapur, and then I did some more research, found Bijapur. Then did some more research, found Davangere. And then I just went on and on and on. And a friend of mine is a German. He works for some pharmaceutical company. He has a fascination for what he calls his page before the Cineplex. But he's not a photographer. He's a medical rep, who from a rickshaw or from a bus will just shoot facades of cinemas. Some friend of his sent him a photograph of Shanta Talkies in Virajpet. Okay, Virajpet is near Madhukeri. All right, and it was just this beautiful old decrepit cinema, and I had to go. So I found my way to Madhukeri, and a friend of mine was following me on Instagram. He said, "Hey, what are you doing in Madhukeri? Do you need any help?" I said, "No, I'm here." He said, "No, there's a friend of mine. He's a coffee planter, and he's second or third generation. He knows everyone. So if you need any help, or just say hi to him, go have a cup of coffee with him." So I called this gentleman, and he said, "Hi, what are you doing? Are you on holiday?" I said, No, I'm here shooting cinemas." He said, "Oh, have you been to Shanta Talkies in Virajpet?" I said, "Actually, that's the whole reason I'm here." He said, "You want permission?" He said, "Just give me 10 minutes. I'll just call the owner." The owner's nephew. So he calls the owner's nephew and calls me back and says, the nephew called the uncle, and the uncle has said, "Absolutely not. No photography allowed." I said, "Okay." I said, can you share the number with me? Let me talk to the uncle and try and explain to him what I'm doing, and we'll take it from there. And if he says no, then I'd rather hear it from him than hear it through another person. So I've got the number of the gentleman. I call him, and he's one cranky old man. Okay, really. "Hey, no, I don't want photography in my cinema. Who are you? I don't care. Please don't waste my time." So I'm saying, "No, sir, just Mr. Kumar, just calm down. Just hear me. I don't want to hear anything." And he slaps the phone. And this happens 3 times. And by the third phone call, I've managed to explain to him that I'm a photographer. And if I go to Virajpet tomorrow, can I shoot the cinema from outside? Okay. You do whatever you like and don't waste my time. Come on. Then I realized, and I hear from his nephew that actually the uncle had cheated all his sisters of the property. So there's some endless number of cases going on. That's why he's very reluctant to let anyone in. And he's managed to sell it, or almost has sold it for demolition. So it's a very critical period. I said, okay. Next morning, I was in my Jeep and I went off. Come and park in front of Shanta Talkies, and it's magnificent. I go up to the gate and find the gate is just, is shut, by one hook wire, a steel wire, an aluminium wire that's been hooked. So I unhook it and I walk in and I shoot the exterior of the cinema. It's one of those old long sheds with a beautiful facade, which had doors on either side of the hall for exits. And all of them have been boarded double and triple and hammered and nailed and super glued and riveted and triple padlocks on the main grill, etc., etc. So I said, chalo, jo milta hai kar lo. I find my way around to the other side, and there's one door in the corridor which has a little ticket window arch carved into it. So I stick my lens through it, and I have this lovely sunlight falling through the lattice work. And when I come away from that door, I realize that the pull handles have a little piece of wood running between them, okay, keeping the door shut. So I, of course, jiggle the door and that piece of wood falls out. I pulled the doors, they opened. I went in, there was another door on the right-hand side. I pushed it, it opened. Suddenly I'm in the lobby of the cinema. I pushed the auditorium doors, I'm in the auditorium. Went up, pushed the doors open to the balcony, went up to the projection room, found these beautiful old Vestrex projectors lying there in complete rust, and state of decrepitude. And for 1.5 hours, I meticulously shot the hell out of that cinema. I've come down, wedged that piece of wood back where it belonged, said, Mr. Kumar, and I left. And I got it. And I think it was demolished about 15 days ago.
Wow. So that's your next project then?
I know.
Yeah, that's the next film, right?
No.
Yeah.
I'm happy with the book.
Okay.
So that's the way it's been unfolding. I go to get my car washed, and the guy in Haldwani who's washing the car says, sir, aap Maharashtra se yahan kya kar rahe hain? So I said, I'm here on a project. He said, kya kar rahe hain aap? Haldwani mein kya photography kar rahe hain? I said, no, I'm shooting old cinemas. Arey wah, kya baat hai. And I said, I'm going to Ranikhet tomorrow, but I'm going via Almora. There's one cinema that I can't find any. Kaun sa sir? Regal Talkies. I said, हाँ, ये तो आपको permission चाहिए. मैंने कहा हाँ, अरे एक मिनट ठहरो ना, उनके मालिक मेरे दोस्त कौन से बनाएंगे? So it just keeps happening, it just keeps happening and keeps happening and keeps happening, and it's just too much fun.
So in a way, that response to Dr. Nirmala's question, right? About, Akila's question about the digital. So we're back to these largest single, in a way it becomes a story about writing about these ruins of single film celluloid projection. There's a beautiful book I have, which I could share with you on Taiwan, because I went to Taiwan a bit like you. I went to Taipei because of Tsai Ming Liang's Goodbye Dragon Inn, the film that is about this lost theater. And then I found out there's actually a book on all the theaters that were being shuttered in Taipei. So there's a book in, if I find it, I will send it to you, or I'll bring it along, etc. So there are these kind of preoccupations about what happens to older movie theaters just before they're being demolished.
I have about 24 books.
There you go.
From different parts of the world.
Yeah, it's part of doing it, Yeah, no, it's interesting. Kind of like thank you so much, Hemant. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lalita. There's a question for you, Hemant, in the chat box from Sahil Kumar. Some directors who maintain the same visual style throughout their entire filmography, while other directors have a catalogue of movies with a mishmash of aesthetics. Likewise, some cinematographers stick to their signature style, while others mix up their style, depending on the director they're working with. So how much influence does the cinematographer and the director have on how a film ends up looking? So that is the question for you.
I think the way Praveen Bhatt, and I mentioned this earlier, he says that cinematography doesn't make or break a film. It's basically an understanding between the director and the cameraman on how the film should look and how much they want to achieve. There is one issue with our country, with our profession, or I think it's just it's a cultural thing, it's a sociological thing where once you become famous for a particular work that you do, suddenly it becomes incumbent upon you to constantly be repeating yourself. I think the signature style, like the South Indian cinema had that. Mr. Sriram started those, big backlights, and they're still there. It's still there. And a lot of cameramen just made their. There are cinematographers whose work over 25 years you can intercut from different films and it'll still look the same, barring the technical improvements in the film stock or whatever. And there are some people who are not recognizable from one to the other. And finally, it is the understanding between the director and the cinematographer about how much they want to do. And how much they want to achieve, and how much commitment are they willing to show towards the project to be able to achieve that. When you decide on a look and you decide on an approach, one of the greatest challenges is to be able to maintain it. And one of the easiest things to do is to just, give up on certain days and make the most of the situation. But it's the ones who stick it out are the ones who actually create those visuals. That's been my experience, largely.
Any other questions, comments?
I mean, I'll just add one more thing.
Yeah, please.
In the 90s, I had photographed a very popular television show called Rendezvous with Simi Garewal. And at that point, it became very famous among my fraternity for having used the technology of the time to shoot white for television, right? White and red were the most feared colors for television. I worked out a way of being able to shoot a white set with, everything was white on that set. And there were a lot of cinematographers would call me and ask me how I'd done that. And I tell them what I'd done. But I think for about 2 years, I kept getting calls from different production houses who were trying to do more talk shows and wanted me to come and recreate those white sets for them. And I, of course, me being me, I said, no, I've done it once. I'm not doing it again. And I just wouldn't do them. And I could have just as well gone ahead and shot every white set in the history of television and made a lot of money, but that's not what I was there for. So it's up to you. It's up to you and how much you want to change what you do as well.
Any more questions, comments?
I have a question.
Yeah, Nandini,
Hemant?
go ahead.
Yeah, but it's a bit different from what's been discussed so far. So this is about actually training and education. It's interesting that in the first half of the film, there's so much reference to the Film Institute. And of course, from the first batch, there's mention of having found out about the Film Institute or accidentally got into the course at the Film Institute. And I was just wondering, I mean, do you have anything to say about that aspect? Because you talked about accidental cinematographers, but how accidental really is it? And what's your sort of understanding of that today? So I was just very curious. There's a lot of reference to the Institute in the first half of the film.
Right, so you'll find it interesting that of the 14 people, I think there's an almost equal distribution of people from, well, not equal, but there's a distribution of people who were from the Film Institute in Pune or the Bangalore Institute or straight out of Bollywood, the ones who just worked and never went to school. Interesting thing is that each of them, because of their commitment to their craft, actually achieved great heights. It didn't matter whether you'd been to a film school or to a cinematography course. The one in this course in Bangalore was not a cinematography course; it was a filmmaking course. So what Murthy Saab and Govindji and the others have studied there is the craft of filmmaking, which apparently used to include carpentry and set design and everything. So what the person who came away from that institute was actually a filmmaker. He knew the innards of the entire process of filmmaking. Now, those people became some of the most significant cinematographers. So it's, I think, this Malaysian documentary filmmaker that I mentioned a little earlier, he saw the film, and even though he has no connection with the Bombay film industry at all, he ended up writing me this lovely piece where he says, after watching the film, he was reminded of a concept in Malaysian culture which in the word they use is spelled A-N-G-I-N. They use it as Angin. And Angin refers to that inner wind that stirs in your gut when you start doing something that you know you're intended to do for the rest of your life. And I think as an example, it's when either Baba Azmi or S.M. Anwar in the film talk about how एक अंदर से energy आई और मैंने कहा सीखो और सीखते 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 हम यहाँ पहुंच गए. Baba Azmi talks about how working with Ishan Arya, after 10 days, he became the most prominent and hardworking assistant because he suddenly found his moment in the world, his space in the world. So eventually, there are people who learned from other people. There are people who learned from books and academics. And they all did the best work. Again, finally, it depends on who you are. I mean, there are enough Film Institute graduates who are, unheard of. They came and they went. But it's up to you. It's up to you how much you train yourself.
Thanks.
There was that famous photographer, I keep forgetting who it was. I think it was Cartier-Bresson, one of those people from that era, who said that every photograph I take is not just a photograph. It's a reflection of every book I have read, every piece of music I've listened to, every fine meal I've eaten, every place I have traveled to. And to whatever students I have taught, and who call me now, I've always talked about how the more you educate yourself visually, the more signs you'll find in the real world that make sense to you and you can make a connection with them. Jeet, since Nandini and I are talking here, she knows this friend of ours. There's a friend of ours who talked about how he was very glad that someone of my generation shot the cinemas project. He says, because you see a lot more than a person from this generation might. The person from this generation might take a better photograph, but he may not find the stimuli, the visual stimuli that you found because you're familiar with them. And yeah, it's up to you.
Yeah, thank you, Nandini, for your question. Any more comments, questions? Okay, in that case, we'll, yes, Lalita, are you saying something?
No, I was just going to say goodbye. That's it. No, I'm
Okay.
just sorry.
Yeah.
I will.
Yeah. So we'll bring this session to a close.
Sure.
Thank you very much, Hemant, for being with us. And thank you, Nirmala, for initiating the discussion. And thank you all for participating.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Nirmala. Thank you, Hemant. Thanks all for joining.
Yeah. Thank you so much,
We'll
Akila.
meet next week. Yeah, we'll meet next Saturday.
Thank you.
Hi.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks so much, Hemant. Bye. Lovely film. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Hemant.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Good night.
Good night, all.